I was gonna say, let me know in the comments below if you've played Concord, but judging by the numbers, I'm going to assume you haven't at all. We need to talk about Concord because this is like one of the biggest live service game disasters that we've ever seen. Like, there's been a hellscape of failing live service games over the past few years, but this is turning out to be like one of the best or worst examples of a live service failure, and also kind of a hallmark of everything that's wrong with current modern game development and how long it takes to produce games. So if you don't know what Concord is, this was a live service hero shooter from Sony, from PlayStation. They're trying to get into like the live service game. We saw earlier this year with Foam Stars. We saw this with Helldivers 2, and this is basically Sony's attempt at their own Overwatch game. I did play Concord in the beta. They were giving up beta access via PlayStation Plus, and my just general thoughts on the game is that it's fine. Like, as a hero shooter, it's just okay. Like, it's very stiff in a lot of ways. The characters do feel pretty unique individually, and they each have their own unique movement style, but there's nothing about Concord as a gameplay experience that really sets it apart from Overwatch or literally any other hero shooter that currently exists, and that's kind of the big problem with it. And they were trying to sell this game as like a cinematic hero shooter with big story updates and a huge focus on weekly story content, but no one gives a shit about that. Like, people care about Overwatch lore. No one cares about the story as a piece of content. They just want to know if the game is good, right? And the game, unfortunately, is pretty mid, just generally speaking. And I was saying just a moment ago that like one of the big problems is this game was in development apparently like 6, 7, 8 years ago, back when Overwatch was fairly new and Paladins was fairly new. And this is kind of the problem with lengthy game development, is you start working on a game. When the game was in development, this was a new thing, a new trend. But the problem is when you take so long to put out a game, the trends that you were trying to chase back then are no longer trending. There are a million hero shooters. This is no longer a novel concept. Even just like the story and the framework of it, this Guardians of the Galaxy space mercenary vibe, nothing about this is like new. Yeah, the moment has already passed. Like, there's so many hero shooters now, and nothing about this game sets itself apart at all. The other colossal issue here is the game is $40, okay? This is significantly more expensive than every single hero shooter that's out in the market. Overwatch 2 is free. Apex is free. Valorant is free. The upcoming Marvel Rivals is free. You cannot be, this is like a general rule of thumb, you cannot be more expensive than your competition while not being as good as your competition. That's just bad business 101. And again, there's nothing about the Concord experience that sets itself apart from an Overwatch, a Paladins, a Apex, a Valorant, any of those games. There's no big PvE mode, which they could have had a PvE mode to separate it from Overwatch 2 that just dumped its PvE mode. That would have been a really good selling point. But no, it's more expensive than all of its competition and not nearly as good as any of its competition. People don't want to be forced to pay for competitive games. Yeah, especially when the market says that, basically, right? Like, none of its competition, literally none of its competition cost anything to play, but you're going to charge a premium price to get in the doors is just completely nonsensical. And so because of that, the game has launched and the numbers are absolutely horrific. How bad are the numbers for Concord? Well, let's take a look first at the Steam charts for another game that came out last week on Steam, Skull and Bones. This is a game that's been out on Ubisoft Connect on console since March, but just dropped on Steam. Steam charts is a great way of getting just a taste of the sample size of what a player base looks like for a game. And currently, Skull and Bones currently sitting at about 1,400 players as of this morning, which is a pretty minuscule number all told, but not minuscule when you take a look at the numbers for Concord. These are the launch numbers for Concord on PC right now, not even peaking above 1,000 players. This is catastrophically bad, and it's also reflected in the viewership on Twitch, which routinely is not peaking above a couple hundred viewers. For most games, the numbers that you're gonna see for most titles, it's like it starts off at a peak and they drop. And for live service games, there's gonna be like some ebbs and flows to it. So for this to be the place where Concord is starting, it's only going to sink further and further into embarrassing levels. Like, even if we look at a game like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, right? That was maligned for being an absolutely horrific launch. I mean, this game peaked in average numbers that are way ahead of where Concord is right now. Like, this is the future for this isn't the future for Concord. This is basically the present for Concord. And we talk about Suicide Squad as it's one of the biggest disasters of all time, and Concord has literally gotten off to a worse start than Suicide Squad. Like, this is beyond imaginably bad, and it's pretty obvious why. Like, the game is just okay, and it's more expensive than its contemporaries. That is just a recipe for disaster and bad game business 101. The problem is, even if you're willing to spend $40, your friends probably aren't going to be. People want to play with their friends, and it's easier to get your friends to try free-to-play games. Is such a true statement, right? I can't, like, right now, let's say I bought Concord, right, as a streamer, and I wanted to get my community into it, right? I gotta convince you all to spend $40 on a game that you don't have the ability to like try for free and see if you even like it. And if you're someone that's already playing Overwatch, that's already playing Apex or Valorant, what is going to convince you to spend $40 to come over and join us in Concord? What is Concord doing that's separating itself as a game from those other titles? It's just, again, like a recipe for a disaster. Wonder if they'll feel pressure to go free to play later, but imagine it will already be too late. I mean, we've seen this with other games. For those of us who know me from Twitch, like Knockout City, like that game started, with a cost and then eventually went free to play. And there was a spike in the player base, but it wasn't enough to eventually save the game long term. For a game like Concord, again, at the end of the day, this is the problem. What is it doing for an Overwatch 2 player? What is Concord doing as a game that would convince you to stop playing Overwatch 2 and come play Concord? That's like the big problem. Besides just the price, is the game is just okay. And we have Marvel Rivals about to drop very, very soon. That is a fundamentally better and more enjoyable hero shooter and more interesting hero shooter than Concord. Who's gonna want to play Concord when they can play Marvel Rivals regardless of the price? Like, that in and of itself is a huge problem. The game is just okay at best. It doesn't separate itself from the other titles. Knockout City and Rocket Blade Point Fall Guys, they went free to play, so the games would have more of a chance. 100%. So I think being free to play absolutely would have helped. But at this point, would going and transitioning to free to play change anything? I don't think so. The other thing that Marvel Rivals has as an example of like why this is going to struggle is that Marvel Rivals has all these interesting characters that everybody knows, and people want to spend money on, like I mentioned in my last video, like cool Spider-Man drip, cool Iron Man drip. Is anyone, if this game moves into free to play, like how are they going to make money? Is anyone going to want to spend money on Concord character drip? And is that going to be enough to sustain the game long term? My guess is probably no. It's not going to attract enough people to actively want to give it money in their microtransactions or battle pass or whatever. Again, when people are already spending money on games like Destiny, like games like The First Ascendant now, which is out there, and again, all the hero shooters that people are already spending money on, where does this fit into the greater hero shooter landscape right now? Like, that is the concern. It's an oversaturated marketplace. There's Star Wars Hunters, the mobile game, is another hero shooter that's out here. And again, Rivals hasn't even come out yet. And it's already a saturated marketplace. I just don't see where Concord fits and what it does differently enough to make it, like, to justify its existence as a title. And so the numbers speak for themselves. No one's playing this game. No one's streaming it. There's nowhere for it to go but down. This is an unprecedented level of disaster, even when comparing it to games that have been labeled disasters. Like, this isn't very far off from where Suicide Squad is, and that was like basically the DOA game of the year. But unfortunately, it has some new competition, and its name is Concord. This game is completely and utterly cooked. It has no chance of really saving itself. I would not be surprised if by the end of the year, like, this is August, I don't see how this game, unless they make a move to free to play and that brings a couple more players in and extends the life by just a little bit, I would place bets on this being canceled and shut down and getting one of those Twitter, like, letters from the studio. We might be getting one of those by the end of the year. I don't see this game making it to the end of 2024. This game is 125% cooked, and unfortunately kind of feels like it deserves to be. Let me know in the comments below. I was gonna say let me know in the comments below if you've played Concord, but judging by the numbers, I'm going to assume you haven't at all. I'm pretty sure you haven't played Concord at all. If you found this video helpful or insightful at all, be sure to hit with a like and subscribe to the channel for more gaming coverage and insight. Until next time, have a good one.